So hello, my name is Hersey Cartwright. My little talk here is going to be on managing vCenter roles and permissions using PowerCLI. I did a talk yesterday on managing SSH for the ESXi host with PowerCLI. So, starting, stopping, managing the firewall. Today I'm going to take it up to the vCenter level and just talk about adding the managing the roles and permissions within vCenter. So again, I'm Hersey Cartwright. I'm a solutions architect at Simplivity. And what I'm talking about today is actually just a problem that I was having that I solved using PowerCLI with setting up a service account for an application. My website, vhersey.com, and then please, on Twitter at HerseyC. So just some resources. So PowerCLI documentation. All of these are, VMware PowerCLI commands. They're fairly basic, fairly easy to use, and well documented. The example script that I'm using is create a Simplivity role, and it's on GitHub. It's also on vhersey.com. So we're just going to kind of walk through the script, what it does, and the different PowerCLI commandlets that are available to help you manage the roles and permissions. So just a little bit background about the roles and permissions. vCenter and VMware products, role-based access control. So what that means is, really everybody doesn't need administrator access, and typically, especially in small shops, right? That's what they do. They just make them an administrator, right? So in role-based access control is what you're doing is you're assigning specific roles or privileges to a user so that they're just able to perform their functions. So give them specific rights to be able to do different things. This applies to not just users, but also groups and service accounts. So privileges in vCenter or in VMware, they're just rights to do things. So power on a VM, power off a VM, edit the settings of a VM, delete a VM, create a VM, modify a VM, access a VM console. So if you have a user that just needs console access to a single VM in vCenter inventory, why would you give that user full administrator rights to the system, right? So, that's kind of just fixing those permissions to apply them specifically for a user and what they need to do a specific job. So a role in vCenter is just a collection of those privileges. So you take a role, you create a role, you add whatever privileges that user may need for that role, and then you create a permission, which is then applying that role to a user. So taking a user or group and assigning that role to that user and then applying that to an inventory object in vCenter. It could be at the vCenter level, it could be at the data center, a cluster, even a single virtual machine. And in vCenter, roles can be set or permissions can be set to propagate or not. So you can set a role or a permission at the data center level, choose to propagate it down to everything within that data center, or in the case of a single virtual machine or maybe a single vApp, you don't propagate any further than where you need the role. And then permissions for users, they come from either local OS or from some kind of centralized authentication scheme, Active Directory, LDAP, what have you. And then all of that is controlled through SSO since 5.1. So just a few PowerCLI commandlets that are handy for reporting, managing, and creating roles and permissions. So it's not just about creating the roles and permissions. It could be about reporting on what users have what roles and what permissions on what inventory objects. And PowerCLI helps you really helps you do that reporting piece. It may not be very often, especially if you're using Active Directory groups or what have you, to give permissions to people, that you're actually having to create roles or assign permissions, right? You do that up front. You create a role, you create an Active Directory group, you create a permission for that Active Directory group with that role on an inventory object. You do that once and forever, but you may be able to, you may just want to report on, what groups have what roles, what permissions on what objects in inventory. So just to kind of list the privileges that are available, get-vi privilege commandlet, so that'll just get the privileges that can be set for a role. Get vi role, that just gets the roles on the system, and then you can actually take that and do get vi privilege and pass the role to it to just see the privileges that are assigned to that role. And then creating new roles. So a new vi role, that just creates an empty role, and then you can pass privileges into that role so that you can duplicate that across multiple vCenter servers. So then in the example, and the reason why I created this script, right? So with SimpliVity, we have a service account user that needs to have specific permissions at a vCenter level. And that same user needs to have the same permissions across all vCenters in a linked mode within our federation. So I created a script so I can easily just duplicate that role across multiple vCenter servers. Get vi permissions, that'll show you the permissions for a specific object, and then just creating a new permission. And with a new permission is what you're doing is you're assigning a specific user or group a role on a specific inventory object. Whether that be vCenter, the data center, the cluster, or a single virtual machine. So just kind of to go over this example script that I've put together, and this is a great starting point. I can think of lots of things you could do with this, right? I'm using this specifically for a SimpliVity user, a service account that were created. Lots of things use service accounts. SRM uses a service account or an account. A lot of, especially in small environments, they just use an administrator account for that, right? That's not really the wisest thing to do. It doesn't provide a real good audit trail of what's going on in your environment if everything is using the same administrator account. So with this, basically, what I've done is I've set up this script where I can pass a few parameters just to the script as far as the username, the domain that the user's in, whether it's local OS or vSphere.local or their Active Directory domain. And then the vCenter that the permissions need to be applied to. And what that does is it's going to connect to the vCenter server. It's then going to create that role with all the required permissions that SimpliVity requires. And then it's going to, or with all the required privileges that SimpliVity requires. And then it's going to create a permission at the vCenter object that propagates to all objects with those permissions using the username and domain that I pass through to the script. Again, that's just kind of a starting point. There's lots of things that use different privileges. I think kind of the point here is, don't always just use an administrator role. There's 3 default roles: the no access, read only, and administrator. Right? Don't just always use those roles because not everybody needs administrator access. Not every service account needs administrator access. So, to keep security, to keep audit, keep those roles and permissions applied to the users and only give them the privileges they need. So that's all I had, unless anybody has any questions. All right, well, thank you very much.